The night had the easy warmth of childhood summers. The kind where time felt endless and every sound outside your window was just part of the world dreaming with you. 3 friends sat cross-legged on a carpet littered with chip bags, juice boxes, and an old TV buzzing softly in the corner. The year was 2006. No one had smartphones. The biggest fear they had back then was running out of batteries for their Game Boys. They called it the Fortress. A maze of blankets draped over chairs, couches, and broomsticks, stitched together by imagination and clothespins. Inside, the air was close and safe. The glow of a flashlight cast long, trembling shadows that made their own laughter feel alive. The walls smelled faintly of fabric softener and popcorn butter. Someone whispered, "This is our castle. No adults allowed." Another voice followed, "Yeah, and no ghosts either." They laughed, the kind of laugh that's too real to fake. Outside, rain began to tick against the windows. The sound blended with the static from the TV, a lullaby of noise that felt oddly comforting. Somewhere down the hall, the house creaked, the natural breathing of an old home settling into night. The youngest of the 3, Danny, poked his head out of the blanket flap. "Did you hear that?" he asked, voice half teasing, half nervous. The oldest, Riley, threw a pillow at him. "Relax, it's just the house stretching." But the sound came again, this time softer, like a sigh. The flashlight beam quivered as someone's hand began to tremble. The middle friend, Josh, joked that maybe the house was alive. No one laughed. The storm outside deepened. Thunder rolled low and close, vibrating through the floor. Then came the sound, slow, measured breathing, from inside the fort itself. The kind of sound that makes your chest lock up before your brain can even think. They froze. All 3 of them. Danny's flashlight dropped, beam spinning across fabric and faces, landing on a patch of blanket that seemed to move with every inhale. "Who's doing that?" Riley asked, trying to sound brave. "Stop it." No one moved. No one spoke. The breathing continued, heavier now, closer. The flashlight flickered once, then went out. In total darkness, sound becomes everything. A whisper feels like a scream. A heartbeat feels like thunder. Josh fumbled for the batteries, hands shaking. When the light came back on, the blanket in front of them bulged inward, as if something inside was pushing to get out. They scrambled back, tearing through sheets and chairs, the whole fort collapsing around them. When it finally fell, the room was still. No one there. No movement. Only the rain outside, washing the silence clean. For a long moment, they didn't speak. The clock ticked 2:17 a.m. Riley's mom shouted from upstairs, asking what all the noise was. They told her it was just a game gone wrong, that they'd made themselves jump. But none of them slept again that night. Every rustle of fabric made them flinch. The next morning, daylight made the fear seem foolish. They laughed about it over cereal, pretending it had just been imagination. Kids always do that, they choose comfort over truth. But years later, when Riley returned home from college, the house was being renovated. He helped his dad tear down the old living room wall to open the space. Behind the drywall, in a gap no wider than a fist, he found a small handprint pressed into the wood. Tiny, perfectly formed, and stained a dull gray. He didn't tell anyone, just stared at it for a long time, remembering the sound of that breathing, the way the air had felt alive that night. He painted over the mark himself, layer after layer, until it disappeared. But sometimes, when the rain falls the same way it did back then, he swears he can still hear it. A slow inhale, a slow exhale, like something trapped inside the walls, still waiting to be found. Around him, the house stands quiet. The paint looks new. The memories don't. The storm had been building all afternoon, a slow, restless rumble in the clouds that followed them up the winding road to the old cabin. For friends, Lena, Mariah, June, and Becca had planned this sleepover for weeks. It was Lena's 17th birthday, and the cabin belonged to her grandparents, tucked deep in the woods 2 hours outside town. No cell service, no neighbors, just them, laughter, and the promise of freedom. Inside, the air smelled faintly of pine and old wood smoke. They spread sleeping bags across the floor, the fire crackling behind them, while a battery-powered radio hummed low with static. Rain began to tap against the windows, soft at first, then steady. It felt cozy, the kind of night meant for secrets, stories, and too much junk food. They played truth or dare until the power flickered. Someone dared Mariah to open the old wardrobe and stand inside for 30 seconds with the door shut. She did it, laughing, counting out loud. When she opened the door, her smile faltered. "There's something wet on the back wall," she said quietly. June rolled her eyes. "It's probably condensation." But when she looked, the wood was bone dry. At 11:43 p.m., thunder shook the roof. Becca dimmed the lantern to make the lightning show more dramatic. They huddled near the window, waiting for the next flash, and that's when they saw her. A girl's pale face, pressed against the glass from the outside. Expressionless. So white she almost glowed. For a moment they all froze. No one screamed. No one moved. Then, as quickly as she appeared, lightning flashed again and the window was empty. "Tell me you saw that," Lena whispered. "It was probably just the reflection," June insisted, forcing a laugh that cracked halfway. "Ours," Becca said, her voice trembling. "We were behind the lantern. There's no way." The rain thickened. The wind picked up. Shadows stretched and twisted along the wooden walls. Around midnight, the lights cut out completely, plunging the cabin into darkness. The only sound was the fire, snapping like brittle bones in the hearth. Mariah reached for her phone, but there was no signal, only the flickering glow of her lock screen reflecting their pale faces. Then they heard it, a soft tapping on the glass. Once, twice, 3 times. Becca grabbed the flashlight, pointed it at the window, but the beam caught only the reflection of their own fear. The tapping came again, louder, closer, until it seemed to be coming from inside the wall. They started checking every window, every door. All were locked tight, but the air felt wrong, heavy, almost electric. It was Lena who first noticed the footprints. Small, wet ones, leading from the window toward the back of the cabin. "We've been inside the whole time," she whispered. A scraping sound came from the hallway. June called out, "Who's there?" The silence that followed was deafening. Then, faintly, a child's giggle. Mariah screamed, her flashlight swinging wildly across the walls, catching glimpses of nothing, just peeling wallpaper, damp wood, and their own terrified reflections. When the generator sputtered back to life, the dim yellow light revealed that one of the sleeping bags was empty. Becca's. Her phone lay by the door, the screen recording video. On it, the camera pointed toward the front window, where rain blurred the outside world into streaks of silver. For 30 long seconds, there was only static and wind, then a whisper, "Can I come in?" Lena dropped the phone. They tore through the cabin calling Becca's name, their voices echoing against the storm. When they found her, she was standing barefoot in the back doorway, staring into the trees. Her lips were blue, her skin soaked, her eyes distant. She didn't speak, didn't react, even when they wrapped a blanket around her. By morning, the storm had passed. The sky was calm, impossibly bright. The girls sat in silence as the police walked through the cabin, taking notes, asking questions that none of them could answer. The footprints were gone. The video had vanished from Becca's phone. When they drove back to town, Becca finally spoke, her voice thin as paper. "She wasn't outside," she said. "She was already in the room when we got there." Lena didn't respond. She just turned the radio up to drown out the sound of rain beginning again on the windshield, soft and steady, like fingers tapping on glass. The house always seemed bigger when their parents were gone. Every creak of the floorboards echoed louder. Every shadow stretched longer. It was supposed to be just a harmless sleepover. 2 brothers, Ryan and Matt, and their 3 friends from the neighborhood. Their parents were away for the weekend, and they had the whole place to themselves. Pizza boxes stacked high, soda cans scattered across the living room floor, the faint buzz of a video game still playing in the background. It was the kind of night they'd been looking forward to for weeks, loud, messy, and free. By midnight, the energy had shifted. The rain had started outside, thin and cold, tapping against the windows in a rhythmic whisper. The TV's glow painted the room in shifting colors as Ryan, the oldest at 16, tried to keep everyone calm after the power flickered once. "It's just the storm," he said, grinning, trying to sound braver than he felt. Matt, only 13, didn't buy it. "Dad said the basement door locks on its own sometimes," he muttered. Everyone froze for a second, pretending not to hear the faint sound of something moving below them, like shuffling feet. The sound came again, muffled but distinct. A scraping, maybe, a dragging. One of the other boys, Tyler, grabbed a flashlight, grinning nervously. "Let's check it out. Bet it's just the pipes or something." The kind of challenge boys always make before they realize they've gone too far. The basement door stood at the end of the hallway, half hidden behind a rack of coats. The air grew noticeably cooler as they got closer. Ryan turned the handle. It resisted for a moment before giving way with a groan, revealing a staircase that disappeared into darkness. The smell hit them immediately, damp, musty, old. The kind of air that feels like it hasn't been touched in years. They went down in a line, one behind the other, the flashlight beam slicing through the dark. The basement was cluttered. Boxes, old furniture, dusty jars filled with nails and screws. Water dripped steadily from a pipe somewhere. The sound they'd heard earlier had stopped, leaving behind an eerie quiet. Tyler swung the flashlight toward a heavy wooden door at the far end of the room. It was padlocked, but the lock was rusted, brittle with age. "What's in there?" Matt whispered. Ryan hesitated. "Storage, I think. Dad said it's just old junk." But as they stared, the door trembled, just once, barely noticeable. Then again, harder. They froze. The flashlight beam wobbled. "Probably wind," Ryan said quickly, but his voice lacked conviction. There were no windows in the basement. A slow, deliberate knock came from behind the door. Once, then silence. "Okay, we're leaving," Matt said immediately, voice breaking. But before they could move, a faint whisper slipped through the crack between the door and the frame. Ryan's name, drawn out and soft, like someone exhaling it. "RYYYN." The flashlight flickered. The knock turned into scratching. Frantic, desperate. Tyler dropped the light, and it rolled across the concrete, casting wild shadows that looked like hands reaching across the walls. The boys bolted up the stairs, slamming the door behind them. Their breaths came ragged, their hearts pounding so loud it drowned out the storm outside. "Who was that?" Tyler gasped. No one answered. Ryan's hands were shaking so badly, he could barely turn the lock on the door. They sat in the living room for what felt like hours, trying to laugh it off, convincing themselves it had to be an echo, an animal, a draft. Anything but what they'd heard. Around 2 a.m., the house went completely silent. No rain, no thunder, no wind. Just the hum of the refrigerator and their own uneasy breathing. Then, a soft thump from below, like a box falling. They tried to ignore it until another thump came. And another, slow, deliberate, moving closer to the stairs. Matt whispered, "Maybe we should call someone." But there was no signal. The storm had knocked the power lines out. They decided to wait until morning, huddled in sleeping bags in the living room, all the lights on. Ryan stayed awake the longest, staring at the basement door. Every now and then, he swore he saw the handle twitch, just barely. When morning came, they went to check. The padlock was broken, lying on the floor. The door stood slightly open. Inside, the air was even colder than before. Dust swirled in the flashlight beam as they stepped closer. There was nothing unusual at first, just storage boxes and tools. But in the corner, near the wall, they saw something that made them stop breathing. A single child's shoe, old, half buried in dust. Next to it, faint scratches etched into the concrete. Words, repeated over and over. "Let me out." That was the last time they ever opened that door. Years later, when Ryan returned home to visit, the basement had been sealed off completely, the door replaced with drywall. But sometimes, when the house settled late at night, he swore he could still hear it. That slow, rhythmic knocking, like someone patiently waiting to be remembered. It started as a joke, the kind of reckless idea born from boredom and caffeine at 2 a.m. A group of 5 teenagers, Ethan, Chloe, Marcus, Jenna, and Tyler, gathered at an abandoned daycare on the edge of town. The place had been shut down for years after a fire gutted part of the building, leaving behind smoke-stained walls and toys melted into grotesque shapes. It was perfect for content. They were running a small YouTube channel called Urban Haunts, where they filmed overnight challenges in supposedly haunted places. Most of their videos were harmless. Cheap scares, clickbait thumbnails, dramatic titles like, "We stayed in a haunted school for 24 hours. It was never real." Until that night, the camera clicked on, the red light glowing faintly in the darkness. "All right, guys," Ethan said, voice bright with forced enthusiasm. "We're spending the whole night inside this burned-down daycare. No power, no phones, no leaving until sunrise." The wind howled through the broken windows as if mocking him. Inside, the air was thick with soot and dust. Half-melted dolls sat slumped in corners, their glass eyes reflecting the flashlight beams. Faded murals of smiling children still clung to the cracked walls. The laughter from their intro faded quickly as the reality of the place settled in. Chloe whispered, "It smells like something died here." Marcus laughed nervously. "That's the point." They set up cameras around the main room, their lights flickering weakly. A chalkboard stood at the front, covered in dusty handprints too small to belong to any of them. Jenna filmed a close-up, narrating in a playful tone, but her voice trembled slightly. "They say the fire started during nap time," she said, "and some of the kids never made it out." Her sentence hung in the air like smoke. Hours passed. They filmed skits, joked around, pretended to summon ghosts. But as the night deepened, their laughter began to feel wrong, hollow, echoing strangely in the open space. Around 1:37 a.m., one of the cameras began to record on its own. Tyler noticed it first. "Did someone hit record?" he asked. No one had touched it. The lens was pointed toward the far hallway, the part of the building that had burned the worst. "Maybe it's motion activated," Ethan said, but his voice lacked confidence. He turned the screen toward them. The footage was shaky, filled with static. Then, for a second, something moved, a small shape darting across the hall. They rewound it, paused the frame. A child's silhouette, head slightly tilted. Marcus laughed it off at first. "It's just smoke or dust." But when they played it again, the figure's head moved, in sync with their breathing, as though it could see them watching. "Okay, stop," Chloe said sharply. Her hands were trembling. "This isn't funny." Ethan lowered the camera, trying to regain control. "Let's just do one more segment and call it a night." He forced a smile, but the others could see the unease in his eyes. They set up a final shot in the nap room, where small metal frames of burned cribs still lined the wall. Jenna aimed her flashlight at the far side of the room. The beam caught a mural, children holding hands under a painted sun. Except one of the children's faces had been scratched out completely, the paint gouged away down to the wood. "Who'd do that?" she murmured. No one answered. The camera picked up a faint sound, a giggle, high-pitched, playful. They froze. "It's the wind," Marcus said automatically. But the air was still. The sound came again, closer now, like it was circling them. Jenna whispered, "Please tell me that's one of you." The flashlight flickered, and for half a second, the beam landed on the far crib. A small figure sat there, motionless, legs dangling, head bowed. They all saw it. No one breathed. Then the light died completely. Panic exploded. Ethan shouted for everyone to move, the sound of their footsteps echoing down the hallway as they bolted toward the exit. But when they reached the front door, it wouldn't open. The handle rattled uselessly. From somewhere behind them, a music box began to play. A slow, broken lullaby. Chloe screamed. Tyler kicked the door until it finally gave way, and they stumbled into the cold night air, gasping, shaking, half covered in soot. None of them spoke on the drive home. The camera had been left behind in the rush. The next morning, Ethan went back alone to retrieve it. The daycare was silent. He found the camera near the nap room doorway, still recording. When he checked the footage, the last few minutes showed only static, then a child's voice whispering, "Don't leave us again." The video was never uploaded. Their channel went dark that night. Weeks later, Jenna got a message from an unknown account with no profile picture. It was a video clip, grainy and low quality. The footage showed the group sleeping on the floor of the daycare, though none of them remembered falling asleep. In the corner of the frame, just barely visible, was that same small silhouette, sitting beside them, swaying to the rhythm of a broken lullaby. It was supposed to be one of their last weekends together before everything changed. Kayla had been best friends with Emily since 2nd grade, inseparable, almost like sisters. But college was coming, and soon they'd be hundreds of miles apart. So they decided on one final sleepover, just the two of them, in Emily's quiet farmhouse at the edge of town. The kind of night meant for old movies, junk food, and staying up until sunrise talking about everything and nothing. The house itself had that timeless stillness only old homes have. The wood floors groaned softly when you walked. The windows whistled faintly when wind slid through the trees. They built a nest of blankets on the living room floor, surrounded by half-empty mugs of cocoa and bags of chips. Outside, crickets hummed under the moonlight. Inside, the world felt safely small until midnight came. Emily had always been a sleep talker. It used to make Kayla laugh when they were kids, the way she'd mumble nonsense in her sleep or giggle out of nowhere. But that night, the sound was different. It wasn't funny. It was heavy. Kayla woke around 2:13 a.m. The fire had burned down to faint orange embers. The air felt colder than before, the kind of cold that seemed to crawl under the skin. She sat up, disoriented, realizing Emily was murmuring again. But this time it wasn't soft or random. It was low, almost deliberate, like someone whispering to another person in the dark. At first, Kayla thought she was dreaming. She leaned closer. Emily's lips were barely moving. The words were slow, broken by shallow breaths. "He's waiting. In your room." Kayla froze. She whispered, "Emily." No response. Emily's face was turned away, her body completely still except for her lips. The voice that came out didn't sound like hers. Deeper, male, too calm. "He's been watching you sleep for a long time." Kayla's heartbeat pounded in her ears. She shook Emily's shoulder gently, but the whispering didn't stop. Her friend's mouth kept moving, the words spilling out smoother now, clearer. "He knows you can hear him." That's when something clicked behind them. The sound of the hallway door slowly creaking open. Kayla spun around, flashlight from her phone trembling in her hand. The beam hit the empty doorway. Nothing there. Just the faint sway of the curtains in the draft. She turned back toward Emily, and the voice said, louder now, "Don't look away." Kayla stumbled back, nearly tripping over the blanket pile. Her phone fell, the light cutting out. For a few seconds, the only sound was breathing, two patterns, hers and another. She could feel it, someone else's rhythm just a few feet away, slow and patient. When the light came back on, Emily was sitting upright, eyes open but blank. "What are you doing?" Kayla whispered. Emily didn't answer. Then, in that same deep voice, she said, "He's behind you." Kayla turned instantly, heart in her throat. But the space behind her was empty. No movement, no sound. When she looked back, Emily had slumped over again, breathing normally, fast asleep as if nothing had happened. Kayla barely slept the rest of the night. Every small noise, the wind, the pipes, the settling wood made her flinch. She kept glancing toward the hallway door, half expecting to see someone standing there. In the morning, sunlight filled the room, soft and harmless. Emily woke up cheerful, stretching like nothing had happened. "You look awful," she teased. Kayla forced a smile and asked if she remembered anything from the night before. Emily frowned, shaking her head. "No. Did I talk in my sleep again?" Kayla told her, hesitantly, what she'd heard. The strange voice, the words, the door. Emily's smile faded. "That's not funny." But there was fear behind her irritation, like she didn't want to believe it could be true. Kayla tried to laugh it off, but something in her couldn't let go. Before she left that morning, she checked her phone. The flashlight app had been running the whole night, and accidentally it had recorded audio. She almost didn't play it, but curiosity won. The recording was mostly silence. The crackling fire, the faint hiss of wind. Then, around the 2-hour mark, the whispering began. Emily's voice, low and steady. The words were exactly as Kayla remembered them, until the last few seconds. After Emily's whisper, another voice joined in. A man's voice, too close to the microphone, saying softly, "She can't see me anymore." The clip ended there. Kayla never went back to the farmhouse after that night. She and Emily drifted apart after graduation. Different cities, different lives. Sometimes, though, when Kayla listens to her old voicemails, she swears she can hear that same whisper in the background. Not loud enough to be certain, just enough to make her pause before she turns off the light. The night had started like every other teenage sleepover. Junk food, horror movies, and endless talk about crushes, high school drama, and dreams that would never happen. For girls, Maya, Zoe, Riley, and Brooke had taken over Zoe's house for the weekend while her parents were away. It was a 2-story suburban home, neat and quiet, surrounded by rows of identical houses that looked asleep under the moonlight. They made popcorn, built a pile of blankets, and watched a slasher movie they'd all seen a dozen times. The screams on the TV were background noise to their laughter. By 1:30 a.m., everyone was half asleep. The lights were off except for the dull glow from a hallway nightlight. Maya lay on the floor next to the couch, staring at the ceiling, her mind wandering. That's when she heard it. A faint scraping sound, like fabric dragging across wood. At first, she thought it was Brooke shifting in her sleeping bag. But when she whispered, "Brooke, you awake?" there was no reply. The sound came again, slow, deliberate, from underneath her bed. Her heart tightened. She held her breath and listened. Nothing. Maybe it was the house settling or the wind. She tried to brush it off, but a few minutes later, it came back. This time accompanied by a soft, rhythmic breathing. Not her own. She froze completely, the kind of stillness born of primal fear. The room was quiet enough that she could hear her own pulse. The breathing was steady, slow, and coming from directly below her. She slowly leaned over the edge of the bed, whispering, "Zoe!" The words barely made a sound. The others were asleep, faces peaceful in the darkness. She reached for her phone on the floor, her hand trembling. The screen lit up, flooding the room with a dim blue glow. For a second, everything looked normal. Then came the scraping again, closer this time. She held her phone out, angling the light toward the gap under the bed. Her breath caught in her throat. Something moved. She saw it just for a second. 2 glints of reflected light. Eyes, human eyes, open, staring right back at her. Her scream tore through the silence. The others bolted upright, startled, shouting her name. Maya stumbled back, dropping her phone. "There's someone under the bed," she cried. Zoe grabbed a lamp and turned it on, flooding the room in pale yellow light. The space under the bed was empty. Dust, shoes, nothing else. They searched the entire room, laughing nervously to mask their fear. "You just freaked yourself out," Brooke said, shaking her head. "You've been watching too many horror movies." But Maya wasn't convinced. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She knew what she'd seen. Those eyes weren't her imagination. They eventually settled down again, but the tension lingered. None of them spoke much. Around 3 a.m., Maya's eyelids grew heavy. Just as she started to drift off, she heard it again. The faintest sound, a whisper of movement from under the bed. She held perfectly still, pretending to sleep. Her pulse thudded in her ears. The breathing returned. Closer this time, rougher, like someone trying not to make noise. She could feel it, the subtle shift in the air, the way the shadows seemed to move. And then a hand, pale and thin, slowly reached out from the darkness beneath her bed. She couldn't scream, couldn't even breathe. The hand froze halfway, fingers curling slightly. Then, just as suddenly, it slid back under. The room fell silent again. Maya shot upright and flicked on her flashlight. The others stirred, groggy and confused. "What now?" Zoe groaned. Maya couldn't find words. She just pointed. Someone's down there. Brooke knelt and lifted the bed skirt. For a moment, nothing. Then she screamed and scrambled backward, slamming into the wall. The flashlight beam shook violently across the wooden floor, illuminating a face. A man's face, grinning from the shadows. His eyes blinked slowly, pupils huge and dark. The girls ran. They didn't stop to grab their phones, their shoes, anything. They barreled down the stairs, yanking the front door open and spilling into the cold night air. Maya could barely form words. Zoe was already on the phone with 911, sobbing as she tried to explain what they'd seen. When the police arrived minutes later, the house was silent. They went room by room, checking every corner. Upstairs, under the bed, they found him. A man in his 30s, filthy, shaking, eyes wild. He'd been hiding there for days. A local fugitive who had escaped from a nearby psychiatric ward earlier that week. He didn't fight when they pulled him out. He just smiled, lips cracked and bleeding. "She saw me," he whispered. The officers led him out in handcuffs, and the girls stood in the street watching, shivering in the flashing blue and red lights. The neighbors had come out by then, asking questions no one wanted to answer. Later, after the house was cleared and everyone had gone home, Zoe texted Maya a picture the police had shown her. It was from earlier that evening, taken on her security camera. The image showed Maya's bedroom window from outside. In the reflection, you could see her and the others laughing inside. And behind them, just barely visible in the shadows of the hallway, a tall man standing completely still, watching. He'd been there long before she heard the breathing. It was supposed to be harmless fun, a simple birthday sleepover. 10 girls from the same middle school gathered at a classmate's house on the edge of town. The place was big, an old 2-story home with creaky floors and too many hallways. The kind of house that still smelled faintly of wood smoke and old wallpaper. It belonged to Amber's grandmother, who was out of town for the week. Amber had begged her mom to let her host her 13th birthday there with her friends. And somehow, she'd said yes. They arrived just before sunset, the air cool and heavy with rain. Thunder rolled in the distance as they set up sleeping bags in the den, their laughter echoing through the old walls. Pizza boxes stacked on the coffee table. Soda cans littered the floor. Someone suggested ghost stories, and everyone cheered. It was cliché, but that was the point. They turned off the lights, lit a circle of battery candles, and took turns trying to outscare each other. But when it was Amber's turn, she didn't have a story prepared. Instead, she said, "I have something better, something real." She explained that her grandmother's house used to belong to a man named Elias Craven, a recluse who vanished decades ago after his wife died mysteriously. Locals claimed he never left. People said they'd seen him watching from the upstairs window at night, even years after his supposed death. Everyone laughed nervously. "Come on, you're making that up," one of the girls said. Amber just smiled. "I can prove it," she whispered, holding up a small, dusty box. "I found this in the attic." Inside was a stack of old Polaroids, yellowed and curled at the edges. Each photo showed the same room, the den they were sitting in, but from different angles, as if someone had been taking pictures over time. The creepiest part was that the photos weren't empty. In each one, a faint silhouette appeared in the background. A man, thin and tall, standing in the corner, half hidden in shadow. They passed the photos around, laughing at first, but unease settled over them like a fog. "You're lying," said Jenna, squinting at one of the pictures. "You edited these." Amber shook her head. "They're older than my mom. You can go check. The corner looks exactly the same." Someone dared her to prove it. Amber grinned and grabbed her phone. "Fine, let's take a new picture. If he's still here, we'll catch him too." The girls huddled together, giggling and pretending not to be scared as Amber took a selfie with the flash on. The light washed the room white for a second. They looked at the photo and fell silent. Behind them, in the far left corner of the picture, was a shape. Faint, but unmistakable. A man. The laughter died immediately. Everyone turned toward that corner. It was empty. Brooke, the most skeptical one, got up and walked over. "It's just shadows," she said. running her hand along the wall. The air there felt noticeably colder. "See? Nothing." She forced a laugh and turned back toward the others. "It's just—" The sentence cut off. Everyone froze. Behind Brooke, the battery candles flickered wildly, and the temperature in the room dropped another few degrees. Then came the sound. A low creak from above, like footsteps crossing the ceiling. Amber's phone slipped from her hand. The flash went off again, accidentally snapping another photo as it hit the floor. The screen cracked, but the image stayed open. This one showed something clearer than before. A figure at the top of the stairs, face blurry, head slightly tilted as if he were listening. Zoe started crying. "Amber, stop. This isn't funny." Amber's hands were shaking. "It's not me," she whispered. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. Screams filled the dark as someone fumbled for their flashlight. The beam caught the far wall, and for the briefest moment they all saw it. A tall, thin shadow in the corner, motionless, watching. The door slammed shut on its own. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. One of the girls rushed forward, pulling at the handle. It wouldn't budge. Someone else shouted to open a window, but even those were jammed. The room felt smaller, tighter, every sound amplified. Their breathing, the wind outside, the faint creaking of footsteps circling above them again. Then, from somewhere upstairs, a whisper, slow, drawn out. "Whose birthday is it?" No one spoke. They huddled together, shaking, until a loud thud came from the top of the stairs. Someone was coming down one heavy step at a time. The sound was deliberate, measured, and impossibly real. Amber fumbled for her flashlight again, finally getting it to turn on just as the steps stopped. The beam hit the stairway and revealed nothing. Just emptiness. Dust swirling in the air. That was when the front door suddenly burst open. Amber's mom stood there, out of breath and pale, holding her spare key. "What's going on?" she shouted, flipping on the hallway lights. The girls broke down crying, rushing toward her. Upstairs, something creaked again. The sound of a door closing, soft and final. The police came later, inspecting the house. They found no one inside. No footprints, no signs of forced entry. But when they checked Amber's broken phone, the last photo she'd taken, the one from when it fell, was clearer now in the light. At the top of the stairs, just before the figure disappeared into the blur of the flash, you could see his face. Half-rotted, one eye missing. And behind him, on the wall, was something scrawled in faint, black letters. "Happy birthday." Amber never had another sleepover after that. They called it the Dare Night. A stupid tradition, passed down through years of kids in the same small town. Each Halloween, a group of friends would pick one house rumored to be haunted and spend the night inside. No phones, no lights, no leaving until sunrise. It was supposed to prove who was the bravest. It was supposed to be harmless. This year it was 5 of them: Noah, Lexi, Jordan, Sam, and Tessa, juniors in high school, half drunk on adrenaline and the need to impress each other. The chosen spot was the old Wexler house, abandoned for decades at the edge of a dead field. Everyone knew the story. A family gone missing in 1987, neighbors claiming they heard screams in the night, and when the sheriff came by, the place was empty, except for dinner still warm on the table. Now the paint was peeled, the windows broken, and vines crawled across the siding like veins. Even the air around it felt wrong, colder somehow. The 5 teens stood at the gate, flashlights in hand, the beam catching the warped sign half buried in weeds. Wexler residence. "Last chance to back out," Jordan joked, voice too loud for the quiet. No one did. They stepped inside. The floorboards groaned under their weight, dust swirling in every direction. The living room still had furniture, covered in sheets stiff with age. A clock on the wall had stopped at 3:12. Lexi brushed past an old piano, her fingers grazing the keys. One low note hummed out, long and broken like a sigh. They set up their sleeping bags in a circle on the living room floor, daring each other to go explore. Noah was the first to wander off, flashlight bobbing as he disappeared down the hallway. The others stayed behind, nervously laughing. But minutes passed. then 10. Where the hell did he go? Sam muttered. They called out, but no answer. When Jordan went to look, he found the flashlight on the ground at the end of the hall, still on, beam facing the wall. There were words written there in thick dust, smeared by fingers. Don't follow him. Jordan's throat went dry. He called Noah's name again, but all he got back was an echo, thin and distorted, like someone mocking his voice deeper in the house. He backed up fast. Guys, we need to go. Before they could react, every door in the house slammed shut at once. The sound shook the walls. Lexi screamed. The flashlight flickered violently, plunging them in and out of darkness. When the light steadied again, something had changed. The furniture wasn't covered anymore. The room looked lived in. The clock was ticking again. A faint smell of cooked meat and candle wax filled the air. What the hell? Tessa whispered. Then they heard footsteps coming from upstairs. Slow, heavy, pacing from one end of the hall to the other. Sam turned to the others, pale. There's someone up there. Lexi's voice trembled. No, we're not splitting up. We stay together. The footsteps stopped. Then, from above, a single loud knock. Then another. 3 knocks total, perfectly spaced, as if answering her. They stood frozen until Jordan, shaking, whispered, It's a prank. It has to be. Noah's screwing with us. But then came the sound of something dragging, long and wet, across the ceiling. They scrambled for the front door. Locked. Every window nailed shut. Panic set in fast. Breaths came quick, hands trembling. And then Lexi's flashlight flicked toward the stairwell. At the top stood Noah. He wasn't moving, just standing there, facing them, eyes wide, face pale as chalk. Dude, Jordan started, but stopped when Noah tilted his head in a way that wasn't human. His mouth opened, slowly, as though it took effort, and his voice came out wrong, low, choked, wet. They don't like the light. Then the flashlight died. Screams. Total blackness. Something heavy crashed to the floor. The air thickened, every breath harder than the last. Jordan fumbled for his lighter, flicking it desperately. The tiny flame burst to life, trembling, and revealed Noah, standing inches away. His eyes were rolled back completely white. His mouth hung open, but no sound came out except a faint gurgle. His skin looked wet. Tessa screamed his name and backed away, tripping over a chair. Noah's hand twitched once. Then his entire body collapsed like a puppet with its strings cut. They didn't wait. The 4 remaining tore through the house, kicking at boarded windows, slamming against doors, desperate. Finally, Jordan found the basement door cracked open. He threw it wide and froze. Every inch of the basement walls was covered in photos. Hundreds of them. All Polaroids. All of them. Shots from earlier that night. Standing at the gate, inside the hall, sitting on the floor laughing. Each photo looked freshly developed. And in every single one, a shape loomed in the background. A tall, faceless figure. Sometimes behind them, sometimes between them. Then came a sound. A voice, soft and right behind them. You shouldn't have come here. The lighter went out. When police found the Wexler house the next morning, they discovered only 3 sleeping bags. The others were gone. The officers assumed it was another runaway case, another urban legend gone too far. But when they processed the photos in the basement, something strange happened. The figures in the pictures had changed. They now showed only 4 teens, Tessa, Jordan, Lexi, and Sam, standing together looking terrified. Behind them, the faceless figure was gone. But one of the photos, one taken in the living room, showed Noah, smiling, sitting at the piano. The keys beneath his hands were stained a dark, rusty red. The storm had rolled in earlier than expected that night, turning the quiet suburban street into a mess of rain and flickering power lines. Inside a modest 1-story house, 3 best friends, Liam, Tyler, and Cassie, had gathered for what was supposed to be their usual Friday sleepover. They'd been inseparable since childhood, bound by late-night gaming sessions, junk food, and the kind of easy laughter that only comes from years of trust. Tyler's parents were out of town, leaving them the whole place to themselves. Pizza boxes lay stacked on the counter, the scent of melted cheese and garlic still clinging to the air. A horror movie played low on the TV, mostly ignored as the storm raged outside. The lights flickered every few minutes, each time drawing uneasy glances between them. When the power finally cut out for good around midnight, Tyler groaned. "Perfect timing," he muttered, grabbing his phone for light. The rain hammered against the windows like an angry drum. Cassie, always the one to make jokes in tense moments, smirked. "Guess we're living the horror cliché now. Power out, storm outside, 3 idiots trapped in the dark." Liam chuckled, but there was tension in it. "Don't say that. You'll jinx us." To kill the awkward silence, Tyler suggested a game, Dead Man's Knock. It was something he'd seen on an internet forum, half challenge, half urban legend. The idea was simple. At exactly 1:11 a.m., you knock 3 times on a closed door, whisper, "Come in," and wait. Supposedly, if someone knocks back from the other side, you've invited something in. Cassie rolled her eyes. "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard." But when the clock hit 1:11, Tyler smirked. Just for fun. He went to the hallway, picked the door to his dad's office, an old wooden one that creaked when it opened, and rapped his knuckles 3 times against it. "Knock, knock, knock." Then, with a grin, he whispered, "Come in." Nothing happened. He came back laughing, but Cassie didn't join in. She kept glancing toward the dark hallway. "That's not funny," she said. "What if knock, knock, knock?" The sound came from inside the office. All 3 froze. The knocks were faint but unmistakable. Tyler's smile vanished. "You heard that, right?" Liam swallowed hard. "Tell me that was you messing with us." Tyler shook his head, pale now. "No, man, I swear." The rain outside intensified, thunder shaking the walls. Tyler, trying to play it off, said, "It's probably the house settling. Or pipes." But none of them believed it. Then, slowly, the office door creaked open. Cassie screamed. Tyler jumped back, nearly tripping over a chair. The door swung wider, groaning as it moved. The room beyond was pitch black. Liam picked up a flashlight, his hands trembling as he aimed it toward the opening. "See? Empty," he whispered. But the beam barely cut through the dark. The office looked wrong somehow. Shapes didn't seem to line up. The shadows felt thicker, deeper. He took 1 step closer, then another. Something moved. Just a flicker at first. A brief shape darting across the far side of the room, too fast to identify. Liam gasped, stumbling back. "There's someone in there." Tyler grabbed a baseball bat from the corner and stepped forward, forcing bravado into his shaking voice. "Who's there?" No answer. He reached for the doorknob, hands slick with sweat. "We're armed, man. Don't mess around." He yanked the door fully open and the flashlight cut out. Darkness swallowed them whole. In the blackness came a whisper. "Low, calm. You said, come in." Cassie screamed again, and this time the sound broke. They scrambled backward as something heavy moved inside the office, slow, deliberate footsteps. Then the door slammed shut with enough force to rattle the pictures on the wall. They bolted for the front door, but it wouldn't open. The locks jammed, even the deadbolt twisting uselessly in Tyler's hand. "It's stuck! It's stuck!" he shouted. Liam's flashlight flickered back on and illuminated something smeared on the inside of the front door. Words written in what looked like wet fingerprints. "Thank you for letting me in." Cassie started sobbing, shaking uncontrollably. The lights in the house blinked on for a moment, flooding the room in yellow-white brightness, and that's when they saw it. A figure standing at the end of the hallway. Tall, thin, head tilted too far to the side. The lights went out again. They huddled together in the dark, breath shallow, hearts hammering. The figure moved closer, each step deliberate and slow. The sound of wet footsteps grew louder until it stopped just a few feet away. Tyler raised the bat. "Stay back." Silence. Then a hand reached out from the darkness. Long, pale fingers pressing gently against his chest. As cold. Tyler gasped as the touch spread like frost through his body. Then, as suddenly as it began, it was gone. The power came back with a sharp buzz. The hallway was empty. They didn't sleep the rest of the night. When the sun rose, they packed up and left without speaking. Later that day, Tyler's mom called from her trip. "Honey," she said, her voice casual. "Thanks for cleaning up your dad's office. It looks nice." Tyler froze. "We didn't go in there," he said. There was a pause. Then his mom's tone changed slightly. "That's strange. When I checked the security camera feed this morning, I saw someone walking around in there last night." "Who?" Tyler whispered. "Couldn't tell," she said. "It was dark. But whoever it was, they were standing behind you three for a long time before disappearing." The call ended, leaving Tyler staring at the blank wall in front of him. That night, as he tried to sleep, he heard a faint sound. 3 knocks. From the inside of his closet. Then, softly, a whisper answered him back. "Come in." The night began with laughter. The kind of restless, bubbling excitement that comes when you know you're breaking a rule but doing it anyway. 3 girls, Ava, Natalie, and Harper, were spending the weekend at Harper's lake house. Deep in the woods, far from town and surrounded by water and silence. Harper's parents were away, leaving them the entire property. The old boathouse, the dock that stretched into the fog, and the sprawling cabin that always seemed just a little too large for comfort. The lake house had been in Harper's family for generations. Her grandfather built it in the 1950s, and most of the furniture still looked like it came from that time. The walls were lined with faded photos, black and white portraits of serious-looking people with hollow eyes. Ava had joked once that the house felt haunted, but Harper always rolled her eyes. "It's just old," she'd say. "Nothing ever happens here." That night, the rain started just after sunset. It came down heavy and fast, turning the dock into a sheet of glistening black wood. Inside, the girls made popcorn, streamed horror movies, and tried to ignore the occasional creaks that echoed through the house as wind pressed against the walls. They were on their 3rd movie when the power went out. The sudden darkness swallowed the room, followed by a brief silence that felt too long before someone laughed nervously. "Perfect timing," Natalie muttered, flicking her phone flashlight on. "I swear the universe plans these things." "Relax," Harper said. "The backup generator's probably just being slow. It'll come back in a few minutes." But it didn't. Minutes passed, and the only sound was the storm outside. Rain battered the windows like fists, and thunder rolled across the water, deep and distant. They lit a few candles, their flames bending each time a gust of wind leaked through the cracks. The living room felt smaller in the dim light, the walls seeming to close in. Ava, restless, went to the big window overlooking the lake. "You can't even see the dock," she said softly. The fog had thickened so much it was like a white curtain over the water. "It's like the world just stopped existing out there." Harper joined her, peering out. For a moment, she thought she saw movement, something dark swaying near the dock, but when she blinked, it was gone. "Probably a branch," she said quickly, turning away before Ava could ask. The storm kept them awake long after midnight. They ended up sitting in a circle in front of the fireplace, trading ghost stories to distract themselves. Ava's stories were the most intense. Half true, half rumor, all unnerving. "You ever hear the one about the drowned boy?" she said, her voice soft. "He lived around here like decades ago. They say he went missing one night while fishing on the dock. They never found him, except people started hearing knocking on their cabin doors at night, like someone wanted to come in from the rain." Harper threw a pillow at her. "You're just trying to freak us out." But Ava didn't laugh. "They say if you hear 3 knocks on your door near the lake, you're not supposed to open it. It's not someone asking for help. It's someone asking to be let back in." The wind howled against the windows, and for a second, all 3 girls went still. Then, faintly, from somewhere downstairs, came 3 soft knocks. "Knock! Knock! Knock!" Natalie laughed it off first, though her voice trembled. "Okay. Which one of you planned that?" Neither of the others moved. The knocks came again, louder this time, echoing through the cabin. "Knock! Knock! Knock. Harper stood, her face pale. It's probably just the wind banging something against the porch, she said, though her tone carried no conviction. She grabbed a flashlight and made her way to the front door. The other two followed close behind, huddled together. When Harper opened the door, cold air swept in, making the candles flicker and nearly die. The porch was empty. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and the lake shimmered with a dull reflection of the moon behind clouds. Everything was quiet, too quiet. Then Ava pointed toward the dock. What's that? At the far end of the dock stood a figure. Small, still, barefoot. The flashlight beam wobbled as Harper tried to steady it. The figure didn't move. It was just standing there, head tilted slightly to one side. Hey! Harper called out. Are you okay? No response. Maybe it's someone from the next cabin, Natalie said, though her voice cracked on the word someone. Maybe they need help. But there were no other cabins nearby. The nearest one was almost a mile across the lake. The figure began to move. Slowly. Step by step, it started walking toward them along the dock. The wet wood creaked under its bare feet, the sound carrying across the still water. Harper, Ava whispered. Shut the door. Harper froze, staring, the flashlight trembling in her hands. As the figure drew closer, the light caught its face. Pale, expressionless, and wrong. Its eyes were black pits. Its clothes clung to its body, soaked and torn. Shut the door! Ava screamed. Harper slammed it shut just as the figure reached the porch. The impact echoed through the wood. They stumbled back, breathless, staring at the door. For a moment, everything was silent except for the rain starting up again. Then came 3 more knocks. Knock! 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 This time, the sound came from inside the cabin, on the back door. Natalie sobbed. What is happening? The knocks came again, this time from upstairs. Then from the kitchen, from the hallway, from everywhere. It was as if the whole house was surrounded by invisible hands tapping in unison. The candles began to flicker violently, flames bending sideways before going out entirely. Darkness rushed in. Ava grabbed Harper's arm. We have to go. They bolted through the living room toward the back door. Harper flung it open and stopped dead. The lake was gone. Where the water should have been was a dark, endless stretch of mud and mist. The dock stood alone, surrounded by fog that moved like something alive. The air smelled of rot. This isn't real, Harper whispered. This isn't real. Something splashed near the dock. Then, slowly, a hand broke the surface, gray, waterlogged, fingers twitching. Another followed. Then another. Figures began to pull themselves out of the lakebed. One by one, their movements jerky and unsteady. Their faces were blank, eyes missing, mouths open as if gasping for air. The girls screamed and ran back inside, slamming the door behind them. The floorboards trembled beneath their feet, as if something massive was moving below. A crack split the wall near the fireplace, dust raining from the ceiling. Natalie collapsed to her knees, crying hysterically. Ava crouched beside her, shaking. We need to hide. Harper grabbed them both and led them toward the stairs. They ran to her bedroom, barricading the door with a dresser. The knocking started again almost immediately. First gentle, then furious, shaking the door on its hinges. Stop! Harper shouted through tears. Please just stop. The knocking ceased. For a moment there was silence. Then, from the other side of the door, a voice. A small, trembling whisper. Can I come in now? Ava's breath caught. That's a kid's voice, she whispered. No, Harper said, backing away. It's not. The doorknob began to turn, slow and deliberate. The wood creaked. Natalie grabbed Harper's hand. If we stay here, we're dead. Before Harper could respond, the window shattered. The cold wind howled in, carrying with it the scent of lake water and decay. Something reached through the broken glass. A pale arm, slick and dripping, grabbing for Ava. She screamed as fingers clamped around her wrist, pulling hard. Harper and Natalie tried to hold her, but the strength on the other side was impossible. Ava's nails dug into the wood floor as she was yanked toward the window, her screams echoing through the storm. Then, just like that, she was gone. The window slammed shut on its own. The room went deathly quiet. Harper and Natalie stood frozen, staring at the empty space where their friend had been. The knocking started again, this time from the inside of the closet. Something moved behind the door, slow scraping sounds like fingernails against wood. The two girls backed toward the hallway, hearts racing, until the closet door burst open. Ava stood there. Her clothes were soaked. Mud dripped from her hair. Her eyes were black, empty. Her mouth opened, and water poured out as she whispered, "It's cold in the lake." Natalie screamed and bolted, running down the hall, stumbling down the stairs. Harper followed, sobbing, grabbing her arm as they reached the front door. She fumbled with the locks, hands slippery with sweat and tears. When she finally got it open, the rain stopped completely. The air outside was silent, still. The fog over the lake had lifted, revealing calm, dark water under the pale light of dawn. It was as if nothing had happened. Natalie turned to Harper, trembling. "We can't just leave her." Harper shook her head. "That wasn't Ava." They made it to the car, their breaths ragged, hands shaking too much to start the engine. When Harper finally managed to turn the key, the headlights flicked on and illuminated something standing in the driveway. Ava. Her head tilted to the side, smiling now, lips cracked. She lifted a hand and waved slowly. Harper screamed and slammed her foot on the gas. The car jerked forward, tires spinning in the mud before catching traction. When she looked in the rearview mirror, the figure was gone. They didn't stop until they reached the main road, miles from the lake. Neither of them spoke for the rest of the drive. When the police arrived later that morning, they found no sign of Ava. No broken glass, no footprints, no evidence of anything strange. But when Harper's parents returned days later to clean the cabin, they noticed something odd on the dock. A set of 3 wet footprints, leading from the edge of the lake to the front door, small, barefoot prints that ended abruptly at the threshold. That night, Harper got a text message from Ava's number. Just one sentence. "It's so quiet down here," and attached was a photo taken from beneath the water. The camera faced upward, showing the rippling surface above, and 3 faint, shadowy figures standing at the edge of the dock, looking down. The final story was one that lingered in the dark corners of local legend, whispered about among teenagers and insomniacs scrolling through late-night forums. It came from a small town in Oregon, where the forests pressed so close to the neighborhoods that the line between civilization and wilderness blurred. It was the kind of place where the fog rolled in thick and heavy, where shadows clung to the pines like secrets, and where one sleepover changed a group of friends forever. It began as a simple weekend gathering, 4 friends reuniting after years apart. Leah, the quiet one, had invited everyone to her late grandfather's cabin deep in the woods. The place had no Wi-Fi, no cell service, and no neighbors for miles. Perfect for an unplugged weekend. The others, Mason, Claire, and Jordan, arrived with snacks, blankets, and a stack of old horror DVDs, joking about how they'd be living inside one by the end of the night. First, it was all laughter. The air inside the cabin was thick with dust and nostalgia, filled with the faint smell of cedar and old books. They roasted marshmallows in the fireplace, played Truth or Dare, and talked about how much they'd changed since high school. But as midnight approached, a strange unease settled over them. The forest outside had gone unnaturally still. No crickets, no wind, just silence. Leah noticed it first. She glanced at the old wall clock, 12:03 a.m. "It's never this quiet out here," she said softly. Mason brushed it off, joking that the forest had fallen asleep. But when Jordan tried to play another movie, the power flickered and the TV screen filled with static. The cabin lights dimmed to a dull orange glow. Then came the knock. Not on the door, but from underneath the floorboards. 3 dull thuds. Measured. Intentional. Claire froze mid-sentence. What was that? They all listened. Nothing. Just the faint crackle of the fire. Then another knock. Louder this time. It seemed to move, traveling beneath them, from one corner of the room to another. Leah's face drained of color. This cabin, it has a crawl space. Mason grabbed a flashlight. Maybe an animal got trapped. But when he knelt near the rug and pulled it back, he found a small wooden hatch built into the floor. Old and heavy, its handle was rusted, the wood warped from age. None of them remembered seeing it earlier. "Don't open it," Claire whispered, backing away. But curiosity won. Mason pried it open. A cold gust of air blew out from below, carrying a smell like damp earth and rot. His flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing a narrow space filled with spiderwebs and old, broken furniture. And then, in the far corner, he saw something. A shape, small, human-like, curled up and facing the wall. Mason's breath hitched. There's someone down there." Leah leaned closer, her voice shaking. "That's impossible." "Nobody's." The figure moved. Slowly, it turned its head toward the light. For a brief second, the beam caught its face. Gray, eyeless mouth stretched too wide in a frozen grin. Then the flashlight flickered and died. Mason slammed the hatch shut, his hands shaking. "There's something down there," he shouted. The knocking started again. Faster, louder, as if dozens of fists were pounding beneath the floor. The walls began to rattle, dust raining down from the ceiling. The fire roared violently, throwing sparks into the room. They scrambled for the door, but it wouldn't open. The lock had jammed. Claire screamed as the sound of scratching echoed from inside the walls, like fingernails dragging through wood. Leah clutched her phone, but there was no signal. The only light now came from the fire, flickering wildly against their terrified faces. And then, as suddenly as it began, everything stopped. Silence. Mason slowly stepped back toward the hatch, his chest rising and falling in ragged breaths. "Maybe it's gone," he whispered. But Leah wasn't looking at the hatch anymore. Her eyes were on the hallway. "Guys," she said weakly. "Who's that?" At the end of the hallway stood a child, barefoot, dressed in torn pajamas. The skin on its face was pale, stretched tight, and its eyes were nothing but black hollows. It tilted its head slightly, like it was studying them. Then it smiled. Claire screamed. The thing darted forward in a blur, impossibly fast. The lights exploded. The fire went out. In total darkness, the cabin erupted into chaos, shouts, footsteps, the sound of something crawling on the walls. Leah felt a hand grab her arm, cold and wet. She screamed, pulling away, and crashed into a table. Glass shattered. Someone, maybe Jordan, was yelling for help, but his voice was swallowed by the noise. And then, just as quickly as it started, the noise stopped again. The air was still. The only sound was their own trembling breaths. Leah fumbled for the flashlight and switched it on. The beam revealed the hatch wide open. Mason was gone. They called for him, searched the cabin, but there was no answer. No footprints, no sound, just the open hatch and that smell of earth. When dawn finally came, they packed what little they could and ran. Leah drove without stopping until they reached the main road. None of them spoke a word. The forest behind them seemed endless, as if it were watching them leave. Days later, police searched the cabin. They found no sign of Mason, no struggle, no tracks, no trace he had ever been there. But one officer did find something unusual. Beneath the hatch, carved into the wooden beams, were dozens of names scratched into the wood. Old names, some faded with time. The last one was fresh. Mason W. Leah never returned to that cabin. She moved to another state, changed her number, and refused to talk about what happened. But sometimes, late at night, she gets a call from an unknown number. When she answers, all she hears is a faint tapping, 3 slow knocks, and a voice whispering from far away, "It's cold down here. Can you let me out?" And though she always hangs up before it finishes, she swears she can hear something else in the background of those calls. Not just breathing, not just whispering, but the faint, rhythmic sound of someone carving wood, etching another name into the darkness below. The same sound that once echoed beneath the floor, the sound that means someone else has joined him. Because the cabin, as the legend goes, always needs another name.